On behalf of ServNet, we're pleased to introduce Tyler Quarter, and we appreciate Tyler stepping in. He hasn't known about this speaking assignment for too long, so we're anxious to hear from him. Tyler has been the CFO and the CEO of the Findlay Automotive Group since 1984. And for this group's, information, he cut his teeth in the auto business with GMAC for a few years leading up to that. And that's actually what brought him to the Las Vegas area. He came here as an area rep and got involved with the Findlay Group on their dealer financing side and ended up going to work for the family. The Findlay Group now consists of 25 dealerships. They're spread throughout Nevada, Arizona, Utah, and Idaho. Tyler is heavily represented or involved in a lot of his community groups. He is he is on the advisory board and the past president of Safe Nest, which provides shelters and services for victims of domestic violence. He is the past treasurer of the Southern Nevada Sports Hall of Fame Foundation and is currently treasurer of the Findlay Education Foundation. In 2009, he joined the board of trustees for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society and has been named president of the Southern Nevada chapter. And he was also named the chairman for the 2011 Heart Walk to benefit the American Heart Association, and he will again chair that walk in 2012. One thing that he wanted to make sure that I announced, and as an independent auction group, we always try to make a plug for the independent business of the sector. We think it's very important. They are one of the 25 largest dealer groups in the U.S. and have remained independently owned with the family for that in the entire length of that ownership. So we'll go ahead and turn the time to Tyler, Mr. Tyler Quarter.
Well, thanks, Jeff, for those kind words. I did talk to Ed Curry, who's supposed to be speaking here. I talked to him the other day, and I told him it was a pretty low blow to quit his job to get out of a speaking engagement. So here I am, and I certainly don't feel like an expert in the car business at all. I'm just a farm kid that happened to get into the car business and be lucky enough to end up in Las Vegas and end up with a good career here. But hopefully I can share with you a little bit maybe about the mindset of a dealer. And I certainly, I'll tell you whatever I know, which isn't a lot. So this might be a short meeting. But I want to first of all welcome you to Las Vegas. We appreciate you being here. We always love it when people come to Las Vegas and have their meetings here and get to enjoy everything that the city has to offer. The one thing I would like to remind you is that all the people you come in contact with while you're here this week, the cab driver, the waitresses, the blackjack dealer, all of these people, those are my customers, and I really, really, really need them to buy a car this weekend. So your job is to spread a little money around while you're here and help spur on the local economy. We've had a nice rebound here recently in Las Vegas, but we could certainly help. It would help us if you would just help spur that along a little bit. So I got to thinking a little bit about how I got into the car business and how things have changed over those years, and it's changed dramatically. But I'll tell you a little story about my introduction to the used car business. When I got out of college, I was young and innocent and fresh-faced and all that, and I got a job with GMAC as a field representative, which meant that I was a collector. I would go knock on doors and try to collect past due car payments. And if I couldn't collect the past due car payments, my job was to repossess the car. And so, obviously, over a period of time, I repossessed a number of cars, and after a certain appropriate period of time, we would have to resell the car after you'd repossessed it. So the process at that time was that I would drive the car around, the repossessed car, drive it around to dealerships to get bids on it, and once I had 3 written bids on a car, then I could sell it to the high bidder. And so my first real indoctrination in the used car business was one day when I took a repossessed car into a used car dealer to see if I could get a bid on it. The guy comes out and looks at it, looks around the car, says, I really want this car, and he flips out a $100 bill. And he says, you know what, this $100 bill, young man, is yours if you just make sure I'm the high bidder. I was shocked. I had no idea that sort of thing happened in the used car business. Now, my family, my parents raised me well, and so I didn't take the $100. But that's the process that was in place for remarketing cars, I won't tell you how many years ago, but in the fairly recent past. And it was a very inefficient process, and it was a process that was kind of ripe for, let's say that dishonesty was possible. So I'm going to give you a view today just on what maybe a franchise car dealer thinks about the whole remarketing process. And I want to kind of put the disclaimer out front that I certainly don't speak for the entire franchise dealer industry. If you put 20 car dealers in a room and asked them a question, I'm sure you would get 20 different answers. Very independent-minded people. And so I don't speak for the industry necessarily, but I think I can maybe give you some mindset, some thoughts of how we look at things that might be somewhat common across the business. Okay, so the question is, what do you think of when you think of a used car salesman? You probably think of this guy, right? I've met this guy. I mean, there are guys like him. You've probably all met him at some point in the car business. But the good news is that, there aren't many of them around anymore. It's an old view, it's an old stereotype of the car salesperson. And the car people, the salespeople or as a franchise dealer, are the number one most important people in our organization. Nothing happens until one of them sells a car. And that's not easy. They're prospecting, they're making phone calls, they're trying to find customers. When they find a customer, they've got to do an interview, find out what they're interested in. We do a walk-around presentation, product selection. They do a test drive, then they've got to overcome objections. There's all this 10-step sales process we go through, and oftentimes they do all of that and they still don't sell a car. It's a very, very difficult profession, and we've got some really professional, hardworking salespeople in the industry. A lot of them spend a lot of time and study getting educated and certified with their manufacturers. And so I really don't like the stereotype of the used car salesman. And I'm going to pick on one of the groups that's actually a sponsor of this auction. Of this event. And I say this with all due love. I really do. But the salesperson is the key person in the industry, and I have a little objection with Carfax. And I've told them this in their advisory meetings, so it's not like I'm talking out of school. But we've all seen the ad where the salesperson is portrayed as a liar because he won't show the guy the Carfax. And it's good advertising because the public remembers it. I see it, I remember it. My wife looks at it, she kicks me every time because she doesn't like the ad. And so what I really object to is the perpetuation of the stereotype of the used car salespeople. And all of us in the industry, I think, should embrace the fact that the sales consultants are really where everything starts. So, your job the next time you're in a car dealership, I want you to give a salesperson a hug. They need a hug, or at least say a kind word to them, because I think they're really, really an important part of our business. Okay, so I'm going to give you just a quick synopsis about the Findlay Group, not for any reason other than that so you can understand my perspective on some of the things I'm going to say. As was mentioned, we have 25 dealerships. We represent 18 franchises, so most all of the major brands. We're headquartered here in the Las Vegas area, but we operate out of 4 states. But the key thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that we have a very decentralized structure. I don't control what goes on in our 25 dealerships. Our managers have a lot of autonomy to run their operation. And in the used car area specifically, they're responsible for acquiring their inventory, for marketing their inventory, and if they end up having to wholesale it, they're responsible for the wholesale process. And I point that out because that's different than a lot of other large dealership groups. Certainly if you contrasted us with AutoNation, which is the largest group, of course, they're a very, very centralized structure. And I understand that when you're of their size, you have to have a centralized structure. But I was talking with a AutoNation manager recently, and he was describing the process to me that if a customer comes into Desert Toyota here in Las Vegas, which is an AutoNation store, and wants to trade in their vehicle, the dealership does a condition report, And that gets sent straight to central office in Florida, and somebody sitting in Florida puts a number on that car and says, here's how much that car is worth. It comes back out to Desert Toyota, they make the offer to the customer, and that's how that process happens. And then if they make the deal and get the car in on trade, that car doesn't necessarily stay at Desert Toyota. Someone in Florida decides, this car might work better at our BMW store down the street, or maybe we want to ship this car to Southern California. And so we do it entirely differently because I want my guys competing for those used cars. I want them to have the opportunity to make the retail sale on that car or take the risk if they're going to end up wholesaling the car. And so I only say that so that you understand that if you talk to a manager in the AutoNation organization, you're going to get a completely different view of remarketing than if you talk to a manager in the Findlay organization. Okay, so I'm going to just give you a little idea. We'll do just a little bit of math. Based on where we're at, 2.5 months, we're 2.5 months into the year, our pace, because a good car dealer knows exactly his pace every day, we're pacing about 15,000 new retail units this year and about 13,000 retail units this year in used cars. So about 28,000 retail units I expect to sell this year. Hopefully the year ends stronger than what we're currently pacing. It'll be a little bit more. But I want to go through this math just so you kind of understand where our used cars come from. We're going to wholesale probably about 10,000 used cars this year. So our entire focus as a new car dealer is on those 28,000 retail units. I never come into the store in the morning and ask our guys, how many cars did you wholesale yesterday? But I can tell you to the exact number how many new and used cars we retailed yesterday. That's what we talk about all the time. That's where we make our money. That's where we get our customer base built up for our repeat and referral business. That's where our customer base comes from for future parts and service business. So the 10,000 wholesale units is just kind of back-end support operation in our organization. And we don't ever forecast to make money on those 10,000 wholesale units. When we sit down and do forecasts at the beginning of the year, we usually forecast to lose about $50 a car on wholesale units. And kind of our theory is that if we're making money on wholesale, then we're not putting enough money into the trade-ins, and we're probably losing deals on the retail end. And retail cars is what we're after 100%. So, and I'll go back to, let me back up a little bit. If I sell 28,000 retail units this year, I'll probably take in about 15,000 trade-ins, somewhere between 14 and 15,000 trade-ins. Last year, we took trade-ins on 53% of the retail cars we sold. And that's down a little bit. That's not a number I've tracked historically for too long, so I can't tell you exactly what that number was 5 or 6 years ago, but I think that we probably were taking trades on about 70% of our retail units a few years ago. But now it's only 53%. And I think that's partly due to the fact that families downsized in their the number of vehicles during the downturn, and now they're adding a vehicle back so they don't have a car to trade in. But for whatever reason, we're only going to take in, if the trend stays the same, we'll take in about 15,000 trades this year. Now you can see I'm going to sell 13,000 used and 10,000 wholesale. I'm going to sell 23,000 cars. I'm $8,000 cars short right off the bat. And I'll talk a little bit about why I'm actually a lot shorter than that, because a lot of the cars we take in on trade, we're not going to keep them as retail units. Okay, so I want to go through just a couple of things that affected dealers' mindset by things that happened in the last couple of years. I don't think it shocks anybody here that we had a big downturn in 08 and 09 and that we cut costs. We cut costs brutally. Between 2007 and 2009, we lost 40% of our retail business. I went from selling, in our organization, we sold 31,000 retail units in 2007, and in 2009, we sold 19,000 retail units. You cannot survive that kind of a decline in your business without being extremely aggressive on the expense side. And so what that means is we went to every expense, and we took a knife to it, we took a hatchet to it, we took an axe to it. We cut expenses like they were going out of style. And so the reason I bring that up is because we're much more fee sensitive than we were in the past. So all along the chain, wherever there's a fee involved, we're looking for ways to eliminate and cut expenses. Now we cut expenses, and you can't cut expenses without looking at the personnel side, because that's the largest controllable expense in a dealership. So we went from 1,350 employees down to about 950 employees over a very short period of time. A very painful process and a very painful time in our history. But how that affects our remarketing chain is that if you look at the used car managers in our organization, they no longer have an assistant. They don't have lot porters that they can use to shuttle cars and move cars and detail cars. So there's outside services we're looking for. If it's whether it's transportation or condition reports or whatever can be provided outside, we're looking for that because we don't have the people to do it. But as I said, we're cutting expenses, so we really want you to do that for free. You wouldn't think I was a car dealer if I didn't ask that, right? But I mean, that's kind of how we look at things. And certainly, you know, we didn't cut expenses because we're smarter than anybody else. You know, every car dealer had the same issue we did. Your business was down dramatically, so we cut expenses. We're much better managers than we were a few years ago. And frankly, those that didn't get aggressive on the expense side of the equation really probably aren't in business anymore. But I just want you to know, we don't profess to be very smart. I had a used car manager a year or so ago come back from the auction one time bragging about how he'd bought 20 cars at the auction and that he'd just ripped them. See, that's the verbiage for if you really got a great deal, he ripped them. So he ripped these 20 cars at the auction, and for some reason we looked in our system and saw that we actually bought our own cars back. If there's a mistake to be made in the car business, we've made it. But like I said, if experience makes you smarter, I should be one smart son of a gun. So, okay, I talked about fewer retail trade-ins. You know, 53% we think is currently what our trend is on trade-ins coming in. So what you'll see, and I know there's auction people here, and you hate to hear this, but the last place I want to acquire a used car is at the auction. The number one thing you can be sure of if you buy a car at the auction is that you were the high bidder. You thought that car was worth more than anybody else. So one of the things that car dealers are doing is we're working many other angles to try to acquire used cars. So we're constantly calling our customers. They get tired of us calling them, offering to buy back their used car. When they come in for service, we'll put an appraisal in their car and let them know what we would pay for that car if they sold it back to us today. We have people that sit and call on the for sale by owner listings on the internet and in the local papers. We're always looking for a way to buy a car. And obviously, if you're talking with someone one-on-one and you're the only offer, you've got a much better chance of acquiring that car at a good price than standing at the auction with your paw up and being the high bidder, right? So that's a big item for car dealers is how do we acquire used cars. Another thing that's a recent trend is the emphasis on certified used car programs. And certified programs aren't really new. I know we were selling certified Saturns back in the early 90s, 20 years ago. So the certified program isn't new, but what's new is the emphasis that the manufacturers are placing on certified programs and the number of manufacturers that have certified programs. And some of them have gone to the extent now of putting a certified sales objective out to the dealer. So in order to hit your rewards and your incentive programs with the manufacturer that are really important to a dealer, you have to be selling certified used cars. And so what that's done is created even more demand for late model, low mileage cars that we can put into our certified programs. One of the things you'll see that a lot of car dealers are doing now is we have loaner programs for our service departments. And obviously that's a great convenience for our service customers if there's a loaner car available for them. But the real motivation from a dealer standpoint is those are cars as we roll them out of service that are really good certified used cars for us. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about government regulation, and I know every industry has a lot of government regulation. But it seems like the car dealers are kind of the poster child these days for government regulations. Cliff Findlay, who I work with, was actually yesterday on the phone with Senator Harry Reid's office and screaming about all the various regulations. And it's like the senator acted like, well, you got to give me some specifics. I don't even know what you're talking about. And so we sent him over the NADA, what do they call it, the regulatory maze that comes out in NADA magazine. And there was a recent article out of Automotive News this week about F&I regulation. And the crazy thing is the government acts like they're surprised. Senator Reid did, he's like, wow, that's a lot of stuff. Well, yeah, but it is what it is. It's the environment we live in. But government regulation has a huge impact on our business. And mostly it's focused at our finance and insurance departments. And we're certainly watching the new Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which has been created by the Obama administration and now has a director. And so they're going to start looking at, at ways to regulate our industry over and above the regulation we already have from the FTC. But one of the things I wanted to point out kind of as a side note is government regulation is one of the reasons that you're seeing the trend toward much larger dealer groups, and the single franchise dealer has a tougher time. In our organization, we've got a pretty small central office staff, but I've got an HR director who spends all his time on wage and hour stuff and EEOC compliance and all the rules related to personnel. I've got a facilities director whose job is OSHA compliance, workplace safety, environmental issues, and all that kind of compliance. I've got a finance director who's a very busy individual trying to make sure we're in compliance with all the various regulations for truth in lending and all the things that go with disclosures. On the finance side, I've got an IT director who's responsible to make sure that we're safeguarding customers' information and our data security and all that. So you start adding that up, and if I'm a single point guy, I got one store, it's hard to afford the ability to comply with government regulation. But so specifically in the used car business, the number one regulation we have to comply with is called the used car rule, the Federal Trade Commission's used car rule, which requires that every car we have available for sale on our lot have a used car buyer's guide. And the used car buyer's guide essentially says whether we're selling the car as is or with some sort of a warranty. And so, and the penalty, if I have 200 cars on the lot, I could have the used car buyer guide in 195 of them, but 5 of them, went on a test drive and somebody pulled it out of the window or whatever. If they come in and find 5 cars that don't have the used car buyer's guide, the penalty is $11,000 per car, no questions asked. So we spend a lot of time inspecting our used car inventory just to make sure it has the used car buyer's guide on the off chance that an FTC inspector might show up. But the crazy thing is that selling a car, we're saying on the buyer's guide whether we're selling the car as is or with a warranty, but the concept of as is has really been wiped out by the courts just recently. You will not find a dealer probably selling a car as is. And it goes back to a North Carolina court decision just recently. And this is all related to the sale of a $2,000 car that a customer claimed had a defect. Now, we're all in the business, and we would all know that if you bought a $2,000 car, it's probably got a defect, right? But in this case, the dealer sold the car as is, $2,000, and I don't know the specifics of what the defect was, but at some point, the customer got an attorney and said that a defect in the car was not disclosed and sued the dealer. And the court came with the notion that the dealer, as an expert in the industry, had an unfair advantage over the customer, and that the dealer, as an expert in the industry, has a duty to know or should have known everything about the condition of that car, and that the dealer, as an expert, is responsible to investigate and inform about everything regarding the condition of that car. And so in this one case, the dealer sold a $2,000 car as is, got sued for a defect, and got hit with $250,000 in punitive damages. Now that got the attention of the retail car business real quick. We're looking at that, and in our organization, we will not sell a car as is. You can't do it. But what I want to talk a little bit about is the fact that any car with any blemish at all, if it's got any evidence through a history report or through an auction condition report that it's ever had any sort of damage, essentially that car is unsellable on the retail end because of the consumer situation today. We're also facing, I talk about government regulation, but we're actually more concerned about consumer litigation and the consumerism. Now, I know you're all probably going to go to the sports book afterward, the games, or maybe you'll go to the blackjack table, bet on Gonzaga. You really should be betting on UNLV because Colorado doesn't have a chance today, I don't think. But if you're going to go spend your money in Vegas, as I asked you to, but when you run out of money and you want to entertain yourself for a little bit, go to a Google search and put in auto dealer fraud. And you will find some entertaining reading. You will find out all the bad things that you've ever wanted to know about what horrible, despicable, terrible people car dealers are. You'll find listings from the government. You'll find listings from consumer rights groups. But you'll also find a tremendous amount of listings from attorneys. And they're advertising for anybody that's ever had a problem with a car dealer. And the one thing you can be sure of, if you see an accident along the side of the road, somebody in that accident will be heading to an attorney shortly. And what that attorney wants to do is he wants to find everybody in the potential chain that he could find any liability for, and one of those is always the car dealer. And so they will, I get subpoenas every day for our files. It's like I'm on a first name basis with the process servers now. They come in and say, hey, Tyler, and throw the file at me. What they're looking for, why they're subpoenaing our files, is they're looking for the condition reports that were done when we acquired a car. They're looking for the vehicle history report, the Carfax or the auto check when we bought the car. They're looking for service records. They're looking for anything that says that the dealer could have had any idea that there was a problem with this car. And if they find something, then obviously that was a proximate cause of the accident, and we get sued. So, and I go through all of that to just kind of talk a little bit about the sensitivity we have to damage that reflects on condition reports and damage that reflects on vehicle history reports. Vehicle history reports are a fairly recent phenomenon. I mean, 10 years ago we weren't talking about vehicle history reports, and they're very, very useful at times. And certainly the customers ask for them. The Carfax advertising that I hate has certainly got people asking for vehicle history reports when they come into our dealerships. And they can be a very good sales tool when they are, a perfectly unblemished vehicle history report. The problem is that they're often now being used against dealers, and it's like we're almost afraid to have them in our files because at some point an attorney might come look at them. I'll talk just a little bit about a dealer's mindset on our inventories. We have a turn policy. Every good dealership should have a turn policy, which basically says how many days a used car can be in stock before you haven't sold it, you need to sell it at auction. In our case, it's 60 days. Some dealerships set it at 45 days, some a little bit longer, but aging of used cars is a big thing. So we have a turn policy, and what that does is that it puts cars in and out of the remarketing chain all the time, because if we get a car that gets to 60 days, our guys are selling it, but then they're acquiring better merchandise, so it creates a sale and a purchase. And it's proven that in the car business, the most profitable days for a used car are the first 30 days that you have it in inventory. So in the first 30 days are your best chance to make a good gross profit. After 30 days, your gross profits decline, and your carrying costs of that vehicle start to outweigh the potential profit. So, and if I'm looking at another dealership, let's say we're looking to acquire a dealership, and I want to see how well it's run, the first thing I do when I do that is I run their used car report and see how old their used cars are. If they're carrying a lot of aged used cars, that tells me it's not a well-run dealership. Okay, the other thing that's a little bit different that dealers didn't used to do is we have an inventory matrix. And an inventory matrix really just is a spreadsheet showing what kind of cars we think we should have in inventory. In the old days, your used car inventory was whatever your used car manager, whatever he liked or whatever he had a hunch would sell. So if you had a dealership and you changed used car managers, it was always interesting because you could see a change in the front lot. All of a sudden you had a lot of trucks that you didn't have before or something, So now we're trying to be a little more scientific with that. And so we'll sit down and we'll make a matrix and we'll say, well, we've got a budget of X number of used cars. How many of those should be certified used cars? How many of them should be certain makes and models? How many should be cars versus trucks? What age cars do we want? What's the average cost in inventory? And just as a side note, in our organization right now, we've got about 25 million in used cars, and our average used car price right now is just under $18,000. That's the average car that we're carrying in inventory. So we're not really a player in the under $10,000 car market. We really don't compete with the buy here, pay here guys there. So we'll have this matrix that says, exactly what we want for our used car inventory. And a key thing in order to do that is we now have software tools that weren't available to us even just years ago. Things like vAuto or First Look. These are tools that will provide information that almost every dealer uses now to decide what the value of a used car is. If your used car software system it'll book out the car for you, but it'll give you a lot more information than that. It'll tell you what recent auction sale history is on that car. It will also, a good part of it is it'll tell you what retail cars, what cars are being advertised in your market that are similar cars and what they're being advertised for, which is huge information for us. If we want to buy a Honda Civic and we pull up the report and it says that there are 25 other Honda Civics for sale of that make and model in Las Vegas today, we can see what the asking price is on it. It helps you determine the value of a vehicle. So those software tools have helped us become much more sophisticated in the used car business. Okay, and as we all know, online buying and selling of cars is much more prevalent than has been in the past. And I think that's a trend that will continue as long as condition reports are accurate and we can standardize them and that there's a condition grade that our guys can rely on. I still got, and I think most dealerships have some kind of old school guys that aren't 100% comfortable with online buying yet. And the first time they get a car that they think is in great condition and it comes in and it's not, then they get even more skeptical. So I think that online buying is certainly a trend that will continue, but as an industry, we have to try to make sure that those condition reports are, fairly depict the condition of the car. And as a dealer, I actually prefer online buying. What I've found is that our guys that buy online tend to stick to our matrix a little better with what I want them to buy. Obviously, it gives them more cars to look at, gives them a wider geographic area, but they tend, some of my guys look at the auction like a social occasion. They go over there, they want to spend the day, and then they get into the lane, they get caught up in the excitement, and they make some poor decisions. And when we're buying online, not only does it limit the amount of time they're outside the dealership, I think they make better decisions. So that's a trend that I like, and I think is really positive in the industry. And I'm not going to spend much time on this, but dealers' marketing of used cars has changed dramatically. There was a time where a used car dealer, when he was going to market his used cars, would take out a full-page ad in the newspaper, put some balloons on the lot, stick a giant gorilla on the roof, and thought you had it, you were set to go. Well, we don't spend any money in the newspaper at all anymore. All of our advertising, nearly all of our advertising is online, and it's all geared toward improving our search, improving our position in search when someone searches for a particular car. If someone's looking for a 2010 Toyota Camry, I've got to come up in the top 5 or we'll never get seen. So that's where the vast majority of our our marketing goes on used cars. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about our goals in the process, and it probably goes without saying that we want to maximize revenue and minimize expense. It's like business 101. Any business wants to do that. And I talked a little bit about the minimizing expense and how much emphasis we put on the expense side of the equation, but maximizing revenue to us really on the used car side means increasing our exposure to potential buyers of the cars. So when we're selling a car, I want there to be hundreds of bidders. Conversely, when I'm buying a car, I want to be the only bidder. I'm very greedy that way. So this is why the whole auction process is such a better process than it was when I started in the business and I would drive a car around to 3 different dealers to get bids. You're certainly not going to have a better chance of maximizing your money than you would with whether you're at a large auction or you're on an online auction sale. So all of that's a great process improvement in the industry. I talk about transparency. We want transparency in the process, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Remember the $100 bill the guy offered me when I was first starting out? That's been the history of used cars. As a dealer with 25 locations and 25 different used car guys out buying and selling cars, I lay awake at night worrying about what goes on in that process. So that's why we've pretty much banned and having wholesalers come onto our lot. I want our cars sold through the auctions, and the auction allow us to know that there's transparency in the process, that my buyer isn't talking straight face-to-face with a wholesaler who might be slipping him the $100. Okay, so I will say, though, that I have seen flyers from auctions and from fleet sellers that offer, come to our sale and, win the big screen TV or, whatever incentives are offered to come and buy at your auction or from your fleet sale. And I would just encourage you not to put my employees in that position, because that is something that we absolutely have a no tolerance rule for, because when you're spending company money, we don't want them looking for personal benefit. Okay, minimize collection risk. I started in collections. I hated collections. I don't want to go back to collections. And back in the days when we were selling to wholesalers, there's been a number of times where somebody bounced us checks or what. We had some problems on the collection side. So that's a real important thing for us in the resale market, is the fact that I don't want to have to chase money. And of course, arbitration is a huge thing. The number one thing that my used car managers hate is arbitration. They want to know when a car is sold or when a car is bought, that it stays sold or bought. And so we'll talk a little bit about if there's some things that we can do to limit arbitration. But from a franchise dealer standpoint, that's the number one thing that we hate. So we'll talk a little bit. What's my wish list? What would I like to see a little bit different? And I want to talk just a little bit about the frame damage issue. Frame damage, I talked about arbitration is what my used car guys are talking about, and they all bring up the frame damage issue also. And we looked at the issues we've got with government regulation and with trial lawyers, and really a vehicle that has a frame designation is unsellable for us. And the National Auto Auction Association put together the rules for declaring frame damage. I've actually read them, and you read it, it's pretty straightforward, it's very reasonable, and so I think that's a step in the right direction. The problem is it still takes a human to complete the report. We actually have had a situation where we bought a car with a condition report at an auction, no frame damage, goes back to our lot, sits there for 60 days, we don't sell it, comes to our turn policy, we take it back to the auction, same car gets declared frame damage the second time. Now, I understand how that happens. It's two different people looked at the same car and had a different interpretation. But the problem for us, and it all goes back to the fact that there's no protection for a dealer if we buy a car that has any sort of damage information on it, that a car that has a rock dent in the frame that exceeds a certain, there's a certain size, certain dimensions, that has to be declared frame damage. I've had my guys tell me that they've had a car that's got the lip of the frame bent from a tow hook be declared frame damage. Now, I don't dispute that you might want to disclose that, but currently in the system, that car is declared frame damage, as is the car that's been in a major accident. There's no differentiation in the frame damage issue, and it's not the damage that we're scared of, it's the frame damage declaration that we can't have. Once it's got a frame declaration, we're not a player for that car. We can't sell it in the retail market. So I don't know the answer to that. It seems to me like if we could come up with some sort of a rating system where, you know, maybe the car that has the rock damage is rated a 1, and the car that has been in a major wreck is a 5, then maybe a dealer could consider buying the car with a 1 because you'd explain that it had no effect on the drivability of the car. So that's a big, big issue for us, and one that I think as an industry we need to kind of work through. Condition reports, you know, there's been a lot of progress on condition reports, and they're pretty standardized now. The electronic condition reports are pretty good. The problem is that not every consignor has a condition report done prior to sale. And what's the saying? Physician, heal thyself, I think. Car dealers are the worst offenders of that. Some of my dealers do that. They sell cars, they don't have a condition report done, and nearly every time we have arbitration, it's from a car that didn't have a condition report done prior to sale. So one of the things that can be done to increase the value of a used car going through the sale process is to make sure it has a condition report. Our guys want to know that when they buy that car, it's bought and it's not going to come back for arbitration. Conversely, when they sell a car, they want the same thing. So it's really valuable to us to know the condition of the car. Okay, one of the things they asked me to talk about was, what are things consignors can do to help dealers in the process? One of the things on the retail level that we like to do is we like to tell the story of the car. When you're talking to a retail customer, we're trying to build emotion in the vehicle. Emotion sells cars. Being able to tell the history of that car is very important to us. And sometimes the history is information only the seller can provide to us. We put in our cars a packet called the autobiography, and it's everything we know about the car. It'll be service histories, it'll be the vehicle history report, it'll be information about what's left on the factory warranty and what other warranties would be available. It's got a copy, we've got the original factory sticker if that's available to us. We want to know where the car was located, the ownership history, all of that stuff, because you can kind of paint a picture for the customer of the car they're buying. If that car was driven by a little old lady on Sunday to go to church, I want to know that. Just don't tell me that every car was driven on Sunday. But that's important information to us. And sometimes, especially as a fleet consignor, if you have the service history report, and that comes with the car, or if you have access to the original factory sticker on the car, that's really important information to us because we're looking at it as a retail sale. And how can we sell that car to a retail customer? Which brings me to one of the other important things, which is what kind of advance can we get on that car when we sell it to a retail customer on their car loan? 80% of the cars we sell require some sort of a car loan when we sell it to a retail customer. I come out of the lending business, and when I was lending, we would base our advance on a percentage of book value. If you had good credit, I might advance you 110% of book value. If you had poor credit, we might cut it back to 80 or 90%. So depending on how much fees and so forth and taxes are in the deal, a customer could have to come up with a significant down payment if we cut that advance back. So the problem we've got now, especially in today's market, is we're buying cars for over book at auction. The book value doesn't necessarily reflect the value of that car. So the thing that's hindering us from buying cars at those prices is that we can't sell it to a retail customer because we can't get it financed because the lender's basing the loan value on the book value. So one of the things, any consignor that can bring to us a lender that will give us retail advance on the cars we buy from you based on what we paid for the car at the auction, that's huge. That's the number one thing you can do to increase the value of your cars is help us get them retail financing. And some lenders might say, well, I don't want to advance based on what you actually paid for that particular car, but they might be willing to take auction history, recent auction history on like cars and base their value on that. And that would be a huge thing to improve prices on cars. Logistics, that's really, I talked about that we don't have the staff really to do a lot of those things. Whoever does the best job of providing transportation and condition reports, details at a lower price and a simpler process would have an advantage in selling to car dealers. And really the number one thing in my mind is just the simplification of everything. We're car dealers. We often laugh in the car business that if we were very smart, we'd be doctors and lawyers and scientists, but we're not, and we're in the car business. So the simpler you can make something for us, the more likely that it will catch our attention. And I talk a little bit here to the vendors that are selling us, vehicle history reports or software systems or even showing us reports of our auction history and so forth. If you make it very complicated, I'll guarantee you if you're talking to a car dealer and you're making a presentation to him, he's going, but what he's thinking is, how many cars did I sell today? How many cars am I going to sell tomorrow? Who have I got coming in to buy a car today? We're thinking about that, and so if you make something very complicated, we won't look at it. So the simplification of everything is really, really important to us. I'm going to finish up talking a little bit about one of my favorite sayings that we use a lot in our sales meetings. I'm the world's greatest salesman, therefore I must make it easy to buy. And nothing drives me crazy more than when guys in our dealerships will set up a process to buy that is something that benefits us as a dealership but has no value to the customer. Don't make the customer go through an extra step to buy a car. And there are none of my dealerships, but there are dealerships around the country that the process is when you come to their lot, the first thing they do is they ask you to fill out a little 5-liner credit application before they ever show you a car. Now, why do they do that? They want to run a quick credit bureau on you and see if they should be even wasting their time with you to see if you can buy a car. Well, how does that that benefits the dealership, but it has no benefit to the retail customer. And so it's a backwards process. And I'll tell you a little story about the simplification of the delivery of something. I love pizza. I like to eat pizza. And I was on a panel one time at a charity deal, and the question was, if you were on death row, what would be your final meal? And the other panelists were all like, well, this or that. For me, it was pizza. I want pizza. And so my favorite pizza place around here is a place called Metro Pizza. I love to eat Metro Pizza. But Metro Pizza doesn't have delivery. And when I want a Metro Pizza, the process is this. I call Metro Pizza and order my pizza. Then I sit around my house for 20 or 30 minutes waiting. Then I drive over to Metro Pizza, find a place to park. I go in, I buy my pizza, I drive home, and then I can eat my pizza. Okay? Well, I don't like Domino's Pizza nearly as much as I like Metro Pizza. But the process for Domino's is I either go online or I call them up and I order my pizza. 25 minutes later, my doorbell rings, and there's my pizza. That's a simple process. They don't have the best product, but they have the best process. I end up eating a lot more Domino's pizza than I do Metro Pizza because their process is simple. And so anything that we can do in the process of buying and selling cars to make it simpler will improve the opportunity for people to buy. We want to make it easy for people to buy. And I'll finish up by just reminding you that as a franchise car dealer, the wholesale process, the buying and selling of wholesale cars, is not my main focus. The whole time we're doing that, we're just trying to support our retail sales. I want to know how many retail cars we're going to sell today. And that's our entire focus. Hopefully I give you a little bit of an idea in our mindset. I certainly thank you all for being here. I appreciate your attention. God bless and thank you very much.
Thanks so much. I got just a couple quick questions. Sure. Okay.